Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us here today to talk about threat intelligence. I hope you're all doing well. As our title suggests, we will be focusing on where some commercial solutions fall short, and we'll be diving into which data sources are often overlooked. We expect this presentation to take about 30 minutes, and we will have some questions and answers at the end. So feel free to drop your questions into the question box as they come up, and we will do our best to address all of those at the end. So before we get into it, just some quick introductions. My name's Paula. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Echosec Systems. And although I'm often responsible for making these webinars happen, this is actually the first time I've ever hosted one. So I'm really happy to be here with you all, and I'm really happy to be joined by my colleague, Sam Wilson. Hi, Sam.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm one of the lead developers on the Echosec Systems API, so I'll speak a little bit more to the technical aspects.
So as we often do, we like to kick things off with a little quote or a stat. According to some research conducted by Forrester last year, organizations recognize the value of threat intelligence. 64% of global security decision makers rate improving advanced threat intelligence capabilities as a high or critical priority. So we thought that this stat really illustrated the shift that's going on right now. As the cyber landscape changes and evolves, so does the threat landscape as a whole. And these changes are really what's informing the priorities of organizations out there. So who is Echosec Systems? Who are we? Echosec Systems was founded in 2014 as a social media mapping company. It started off as a tool that used Twitter data to find out where some students were hanging out at a major university, but it quickly became much more powerful than that when our CEO decided to run some searches over some classified secure facilities and noticed that there were some things being leaked on the internet that shouldn't have been. So we knew early on that this was going to be an important technology for the security and intelligence community, and we've been building into that space ever since. We now offer social media threat detection and geolocation alongside dark web monitoring and 24/7 digital asset protection via our risk portal. So today we're really a comprehensive threat intelligence and digital risk protection company. We have a platform and an API solution, and we serve clients in retail, e-commerce, healthcare, finance, and government. We're very devoted to data privacy and compliance, and because of this, we're one of the few solutions in this space that can be used globally, adhering to the strictest standards in the world. And we don't do it alone. In order to develop the best products possible, we have partners. Along with the individual agreements we've made with our data providers, we also partner with WebHose, a leading data collection provider that turns unstructured web content into machine-readable data feeds. Our partnerships help us deliver the best quality and widest breadth of data to our end users. So why are we here today? You've probably joined us today because you use online data for your job. And you're probably well aware of the overwhelming number of feeds that are constantly coming online and disappearing. From dark web marketplaces to paste sites to messaging apps and fringe social networks, there are just so many places for people to share bad things online. We are here to make your job easier by making threat data more accessible to you and presenting you with the information you need as clearly and as efficiently as possible. Data diversity is a major priority for our clients, and it really drives the direction of product development here at Echosec Systems. Today, we want to talk about data diversity specifically in the context of our API offering. As the online risk landscape changes, we change. Our objective is to adapt our data offerings as emerging online sources gain relevance. This is critical for the success of the projects we work on with our clients. Existing solutions have coverage gaps. It would be unrealistic to believe otherwise. We'll address some of these gaps today and talk about how you can boost your intelligence capabilities with a well-rounded approach. Our hope is that you can walk away from this webinar with a bit of a deeper understanding of the online threat landscape, and that you can use that to inform your security strategy into 2021.
And I'm hoping that for those in the audience that already use the Echosec Systems platform, that we can offer some insight into the API. The API provides data to our apps, but there may be opportunities for integrating the API directly into other platforms or interfaces that your organization uses. As Paula mentioned, it is important to incorporate diverse data sets into your threat analysis, but it is also important to be able to analyze that data in multiple ways. The flexibility to analyze and manipulate data in a way that makes the most sense for your organization is something that the Echosec Systems API can help with.
Great, thanks, Sam. So who do we work with? If we have reached out to you and invited you here, it's most likely that your work revolves largely around cybersecurity, and that could mean a lot of things. Based on conversations with our clients and others in this field, the topic of data source diversity for threat intelligence is crucial regardless of your particular industry. So whether you work in finance, retail, or government, that doesn't determine whether or not your organization needs a threat intelligence API. It's not about what industry you're in, it's about what your goals and requirements are at the end of the day. So some examples of who we work with are corporate security operations centers to bolster intelligence integrations, government security professionals with existing systems requiring more diverse data to pull in, as well as other threat intelligence companies requiring new inputs to offer their own clients. So the threat landscape is changing very quickly. The dark web was once considered the mecca for security threats like data breaches, but this is not exactly the case anymore. The intelligence breadcrumb almost always goes between surface, deep, and dark web networks. Threat actors are becoming more active on other types of online platforms, including forums, image boards, messaging apps, paste sites, and decentralized platforms. So why is this happening? These web spaces are just simply more accessible to threat actors, and they can reach a much wider audience. This is extremely valuable if the goal is to do something like spread disinformation or circulate a data leak, for example. Threat actors also tend to be less concerned with detection on these less anonymized networks. Decentralized platforms are also becoming more popular for threat actors because they're extremely challenging to take down. With decentralization, content is hosted on multiple global or user-operated servers, making them highly immune to censorship.
The online threat landscape is also no longer just for detecting cyber threats like data breaches and malware. Online platforms are crucial for monitoring physical environments, which is important for both corporate security and global intelligence. Other emerging use cases include fraud and theft detection, internal threats, damaging viral content, disinformation, doxing, targeted harassment. There are indications that there has been a significant rise in online extremism in 2020. So as online platforms are increasingly used by extremists to recruit and plan, monitoring them will become more and more important for both physical and digital threats. These communities are also engaging in a wider variety of online platforms than we've seen before. Mainstream networks like YouTube allow them to reach a wider audience, but other hidden platforms allow them to communicate and plan more explicitly. Many communities are migrating to alternative platforms as social media providers crack down on extremist content.
We've seen a lot of that in the news lately, for sure. So it's safe to say that if you are not pulling in alternative data sources like the ones we're talking about here, you're most likely overlooking critical threats. For corporate security teams, this could mean something like missing early data breach indicators. When you're solely focused on technical feeds and dark web data for locating leaks, you're likely to miss quite a bit. For example, Nintendo's recent Giga leak was first identified through a post on 4chan. Unidentified breaches or longer detection times could literally cost your organization millions. Paying attention to these networks can also mean catching disinformation or other damaging content before it goes viral. For intelligence teams, this could mean overlooking valuable context when monitoring environments around the world like conflict zones, political unrest, or terrorism and extremism activity. It could also mean that physical security and public safety threats could go undetected.
The online ecosystem increasingly shapes the world that we live in, but it is constantly changing. Paulo mentioned 4chan as a data source, and I'd like to follow up on that example a little bit. So posts on 4chan and other image boards like it are ephemeral. On some of 4chan's most active boards, a post may only exist for an hour or less. However, these posts can have real-world implications. For example, the QAnon phenomenon originated on 4chan. This movement is now impacting the American political landscape and spreading across the world. And it would have been really difficult to predict the impact that QAnon would have when it first appeared. And because the data on image boards does not persist, it would have been impossible to return to it and analyze it after the fact if it was of interest to your organization. However, we ingest ephemeral data from many sources across the web and retain it. And as such, we will always have access to it. And by extension, so will our users.
So getting access to alternative web sources isn't as easy as manually collecting data on these sites. As a security professional, you likely know that manual navigation is way too clunky and way too time-consuming to be a viable option. Forrester recently did a survey that said the average security operations team already sees 11,000 daily alerts, but only has the resources to address 72% of them. At our company, that's what we call alert fatigue, and it is a real problem. It's also hard to keep track of relevant sources. Many alternative threat intelligence sources are obscure enough that analysts might not know they even exist to look there for threats. Some websites like forums and image boards emerge and turn over quickly, making it hard to keep track of what's relevant. So there's a lack of coverage and there's a functional gap. For security teams who realize the value of online sources, they may have to navigate them manually, setting up dummy accounts in some cases. Recent industry research suggests that commercial threat intelligence vendors vary widely in their data coverage, overlapping 4% at most, even when tracking the same specific threat groups. So, how many critical alerts are being missed by security teams, even when there's using more than one vendor? The study only compared standard commercial threat intelligence feeds. This suggests that data coverage is even less reliable when factoring in the more alternative sources.
As Paula mentioned, managing a high volume of data can be a challenge for human analysts. And that's part of why we're working to offload some of the analysis to our machine learning algorithms. By incorporating a wide range of data sources, then normalizing, enriching, and indexing the data, it makes it easier to obtain the data that is most relevant to your organization, whether by a human analyst or through the use of software.
So when we say relevant data sources, what do we mean by that? We've broken this down into two broad categories: standard versus alternative. Standard sources are feeds that your team might already have access to through a commercial threat intelligence solution. These include technical feeds like Taxi, as well as mainstream social media. These are commonly offered via API so that you can funnel the data directly into your existing system.
Alternative sources are feeds that you might be less likely to have streamlined access to. They are not typically offered through commercial off-the-shelf APIs, but sticking to standard threat intelligence feeds may fail to capture many of the emerging risks we've discussed so far in this presentation. So security teams require access to all of these for a comprehensive solution.
Which brings us to, what does a more comprehensive solution look like? Right now, the Echosec Systems API provides access to dark web, deep web, mainstream social media platforms, decentralized social networks, forums, image boards, messaging apps, and pay sites. We source a lot of this data in unique ways. For example, we've built proprietary web crawlers that actually go and sit in, for example, Telegram chat rooms to gather public posts that would not be available through other commercial Telegram API offerings. Combining these kind of obscure data feeds with the more mainstream conventional feeds allows you to pivot between these digital realms to improve your workflow.
As Paula mentioned, we have a wide variety of data sources. some that are more mainstream and others that are on the fringe. But we're increasingly looking at online extremist communities, international social media platforms, breach data dumps. So in addition to our mainstream data sources, we're moving further into those fringes, but not geared towards any single type of online community or data source. So by collecting this diversity of data, we're able to create a web of connections that might not be expected. This could mean that an email found on the dark web may be linked to leaked credentials on the surface web, which may expose other personally identifiable information for that user. This web of connections can tell a story that a single data point never could.
So we've covered a lot about why it's important to gather these data sources, but how does our API actually work? For those of you not familiar with APIs, the kind of long and short of it is they funnel data from online sources directly into security tooling or interface rather than integrating the data manually. For example, our platform, the Echosec Systems platform, is how users can view and interact with online data in a user-friendly interface. But our API is the backend. It's how we bring that data in and make it accessible and searchable. Many of our end users are platform users, meaning they want the pre-built UI, the pretty map, the ability to save searches and get alerts, but API users don't require a pre-built platform. They just need the data.
Yeah, so the Echosec Systems API connects to our database and provides data to the apps in our product suite, but it can also provide data directly to our clients. How this works is we ingest data from across the dark web, deep web, and surface web, and as we ingest that data, we normalize it. Essentially, this means that we convert data to a consistent format. We also enrich the data with our machine learning threat classifiers. And once the data is converted to this normalized enriched format, it is added to our database indices. And the data in these indices is then accessed via the API. So I've realized at this point that we haven't actually defined what an API is for those of you that are unfamiliar. So an API is an application programming interface. So as we mentioned, it's an interface for accessing data from our database in this case. It provides data to the Echosec Systems platform and our API users, and that data is sent in the form of JSON. That's JavaScript object notation, which you see on the right-hand side of this slide. And our API uses REST architecture, which stands for representational state transfer, which is just a set of constraints that is used for web technologies to make sure that the requests and responses are in the expected format.
Cool. And we're getting into some, I call it the fun part, but it's all the fun part, right?
Yeah, so ahead of this presentation, I was curious about certain metrics in our database, and I realized that this could be a good opportunity to maybe do a brief demo. I was curious about how much data was being added to our database over a given time period, and that's not something that our applications are specifically built to determine. However, by making an API query, I can easily determine that. So I threw together a little app that answers a couple simple questions I had using our API.
And I'm going to try and click, but not click too many times. There we go.
All right, so you can see here we've got the question of how many new social media posts were added to our database in the last X days. So we're starting with 3. We're going to query the API here. Looks like over 3 million posts in the last 3 days that were added to our social endpoint. We want to bump that up to 12 and have a look. Query again. We've got 14 million. And just out of curiosity, we'll bump that to 30 and see how many were ingested in the last 30 days. So 34 million. So it looks like on average, we're ingesting a little bit more than 1 million posts a day into our social endpoint. Now, the next question is how many total posts do we have in the database from 4chan? This is one of our providers or one of our data sources. So it looks like we have 150 million. So I want to draw your attention to the 783 there because that will be important in just a second here. Now, this is the number of posts that are currently in our database from the time that we first started ingesting data from 4chan. But if we run that again, you're going to see here, so it's actually gone from 783 to 843. because in the few seconds since I began speaking, we've actually been ingesting posts in real time. So this is a 24/7 operation, so we're constantly adding new data.
That's cool. I want to see if we can get that onto the website so that people can come and interact with it.
I'll see what I can do.
Okay. So the long and short of it, there is no silver bullet for effective threat intelligence. You need lots of data from multiple different data providers and sources, and vendors need to continue to develop proprietary technology and web crawlers to gather data from the more obscure sources. So how do you ensure that you're getting all of the relevant data possible and conducting efficient analysis and triage? That leads us to our next slide, where we get into a little bit more of the proprietary technology and the ML that we're developing here at Echosec Systems. So machine learning functionality is a mega buzzword, and it's pretty much a non-negotiable for intelligence analysts who, as we talked about earlier, are often bogged down with alert overload. While some commercial APIs are useful for gathering online data in real time, often that data is not stored or organized in formats ideal for training machine learning models. Since our API is ingesting millions of posts daily, we're in an ideal position to make use of that data and develop our own models to deliver intelligent capabilities. Our database, which is technically a data lake, we have resources on that. If anyone would like them, let me know and I'll send them your way, provides our team with a historical data pool ideal for developing machine learning classifiers. Because of that, our API comes with built-in ML capabilities for detecting posts within 8 distinct threat categories.
So while I have worked with integrating this data into our platform and making it available through our API and our product suite, I am by no means an expert on machine learning. Luckily, we have asked our resident expert on machine learning to share some of his insights into his work. He's based out of South Africa, so he wasn't able to join us for the live webinar, but he was kind enough to record a video for us to show. So it's my pleasure to hand this portion off to Eric McLaughlin, our machine learning expert and all-around nice guy.
He is very nice. Thanks so much for coming on today, Eric. Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Eric. I am a software developer and linguist. I'm kind of born and raised South African, but I've spent 6 years in Japan. And during my time, I've kind of developed a particular passion for where linguistics meets computer science. And so computational linguistics is kind of my space, and that's how I like to add value, is just playing with language and trying to figure out how successful can we be at teaching computers to understand what we're saying, and how can we use that in a way that benefits society. And I think that at Echosec, we've got that balance right, where we're doing good things. We're really doing good things, not just for business, but for society, I think. When we started designing our machine learning capabilities, we used some existing data sets that are available out there, and those kind of do classifications. They were built basically so that you can determine the tone of conversations and to see whether conversations were going to lead to people leaving a forum, for example, because people are very invested in creating an internet that's open and accessible to everyone. So there were a bunch of data sets that are available for those kinds of conversations, to be able to classify those kinds of conversations. And so we developed a machine learning pipeline that was able to use that data and to leverage that data, and we're applying it in our system as well, because it's very helpful to be able to tell whether the tone of a conversation is threatening or not. So those kinds of classifiers are useful to us. But we've taken it a bit beyond that, where we have identified new threat types or new categories of threat detection, and we are applying our same pipeline to these new types of threats as well. So one of the types of threats that we're able to detect is not available to other people is to be able to identify data disclosure, for example. So whether we're monitoring conversations to find out, are people talking about a hack? Are people talking about the disclosure of new information? And we're trying to target it so that it's not picking up the reshares of the information, but it's picking up the first conversations about a hack that's taking place, which I think is quite unique. We also have a classifier for PII, so that's personally identifiable information. And we want our clients to be able to know as early as possible whether their own information has been breached. So one of our classifications is to be able to detect personally identifiable information, whether it's anything like credit cards or addresses of your employees. We're going to be able to pick that up as soon as possible.
So that explains the question of what is unique about our machine learning capabilities compared to other threat intelligence solutions. You've created unique classifiers.
Yeah, exactly. We're not just using the stuff that's available out there. We're actually creating our own classifiers based off data that we have scrubbed off our own internal databases. So that's another nice thing about it, is that when we're building a classifier, we're using our own data as the source. So when you're using somebody else's data, you don't always know where that data comes from. But for us, we know that we're using the source of our data is what we're wanting to apply our classifiers to. And so there's going to be a very, very close match between the classifier that we build and the data we're applying it to, which I think is also a good strength.
Yeah, that's excellent. What do you believe is the key problem that we're solving with this technology for our end users?
When you're trying to create an intelligent solution, you're trying to give your customers the most meaningful information first. And so it's all very good and well to have a sophisticated like Boolean logic type text search. But when you're searching through the amounts of data that we're searching through, the number of results you get is just astronomically large. And so we need a way of making sure that our clients aren't drowning in data. We need to make sure that the data that's most important to them is the data that they're going to see first when they open the application. And that's really the underlying need that we're trying to solve with our machine learning, is that we're using natural language processing and machine learning to teach the computer to identify these threat categories. And so it's going to be able to filter, it's going to be able to bring to the fore any kinds of posts that match certain criteria. And not only is it doing that in English, I think one of the things that sets us apart is that we're building our classifiers from the ground up to be able to handle about 100 languages. So we've still got work to do, but the foundation is there. Right now, it is classifying multilingual text, and it's bringing back results that we want to see and that we can show to our clients. And that, I think, is another great thing, is that there's a lot of research on English. There's a lot less research on other languages. And so when you're able to use the technology that we have and leverage that to be able to perform the classification on 100 languages simultaneously and have them ranked according to how well it matches, I think that's really, really value added.
Is that processing something that is unique to us?
I do think that it's significant. I mean, it's pretty cutting edge. I don't think that there are many people that are trying to create a production class system that's able to handle 100 languages simultaneously. I think that is very unique.
Great. So we even got a little guest appearance by Eric's little kid in the background there. So to wrap this up, as a security professional, you need access to an incredibly diverse range of data sources, and you need machine learning to help you manage all the information that comes in. Looking at all these sources together within your tooling means you get much greater context than you would if you were to view all of these different sources separately. In a holistic strategy, including the Echosec Systems API, the data from obscure networks is included. That means you don't have to chase these threat actors all over the internet, because we do that for you. An API like ours also retains content that has been deleted on the original site since it's been crawled, allowing for more thorough investigations than what's possible with manual searches. This is extra important for networks like 4chan, where content turns over quickly. When collected and cataloged appropriately, a wider variety of online data can be used to train effective machine learning models. These can support faster and more accurate threat detection going forward, which will continually relieve your team of overwhelm and alert fatigue over time. Anything else to add, Sam, before we jump into the questions?
No, I think that about covers it, Paula.
Great. Okay, so thanks so much for sticking with us here, everyone. I'm going to answer a few questions here. Let's see. Okay, so can I get notifications for specific feeds or posts? Sam, do you want to handle that one?
Via the API, no, there's no notification system through the Echosec platform, like through our actual applications. There are opportunities to get notifications, but no, not through the API.
Okay. What would you say are the most overlooked feeds that I may not have heard of?
One that was added recently that has some pretty toxic content is Vote, V-O-A-T. There was a bit of a, I can't remember precisely what the details were, but there's a large chunk of the community that moved on from Reddit to Vote with the intention of being more free speech focused, but as a result, it's sort of been populated by yeah, like I say, some fairly nasty elements at times. So that's one that's maybe a little bit under the radar.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about Gab, or sorry, about 4chan, but there's also Gab and other image boards similar to 4chan that are on the dark web, which obfuscates their access for sure.
Great. And can API customers purchase access to select sources, or does it include all of them?
I'll be honest, I'm not as well versed on the on that side of things as I could be. I believe right now we offer access to all three of our endpoints, so the social, documents, and natural language processing endpoints, all as a single package. But I believe that the plan is to, as we're adding additional endpoints, that we will be able to segment them.
Great. What is the difference between the API and the platform? So we covered that a little bit in that the platform is really the user interface with the data behind it. It's kind of a package deal, whereas the API is strictly the data, the organized, structured data. But do you have anything else to add to that, Sam?
Yeah, you can really think of the platform as the graphical interface, as you say, whereas I hesitate to say raw data because it is processed data, it's normalized and enriched, but it is the data that undergirds the rest of the system. So if you have your own interface that you would like to integrate our data into without using our graphical interface, then the API is a perfect solution for you.
Great. And I've got, is the Echosec service limited to USA or Canada, or can customers in Europe license the service as well? Yes, indeed. We're GDPR compliant. We are compliant with I believe every country in the world. So we can absolutely work together if you are based in Europe. I think that's it for the questions. So unless there's anything to add, we'll wrap that up for today. And we will be following up with an email so we can absolutely keep the conversation going afterwards.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Sam, for doing that with me.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. That was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.